sitting.
I'm okay. I'm okay. If I was going to talk all night, I would. But well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you. It's just a great opportunity to get out and meet some folks. We're right downtown, so we're not far from you. A lot of our speaking engagements are across the state, so it's good to kind of know who our neighbors are and recognize that you guys have tremendous impact because you are so close to the Capitol and that you have the ability to be a little bit more engaged with our folks that we send there than maybe some of the other groups that I speak with. Let me just start. I make an assumption that at every group there's a lot of folks who may not know who we are. So what I want to do is really just give you an overview of who the Family Foundation is, what we do, and then kind of talk a little bit about how I see the connections between what you're passionate about and what we're passionate about, so that we can maybe come together in unity in some very specific efforts. The Family Foundation is Virginia's oldest and largest pro-family organization. We're very broad-based, so our issue set is very wide. We're connected, if you're familiar with Focus on the Family. That might be a name that's familiar to you all. We are one of they have what they call family policy councils, and these are groups all across the country, aiming for one in every state, but there's about 40 of them, that focus on the same issues that they do at the national level, but at the state level. We are specifically Virginia-based. We focus in very specifically on our governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, House of Delegates, and senators. And what we do, we were founded in 1985, so we're coming up towards our 30th anniversary soon. And our founder was an information guy, so he would have loved, our founder would have loved these inserts. He was all about how do we educate folks, because he recognized, even back then, the low voter information group, and found that unfortunately our representatives happen to be sometimes low information representatives, and so he did a lot of that kind of education. That was really our roots. And what I share is that about our scope is that we are an organization that focuses in on 5 basic principles, some of which overlap with what you do, some of which are on some other issues. The first one is that we believe that a society that values the unborn is also going to value the elderly, the downtrodden, that a culture of life is critical on both ends, and that we want to develop that culture of life. We also believe that a society that respects a biblical definition of marriage, we are a faith-based organization, will also respect fidelity within marriage, that those things affect our family in a very intimate and personal way, and they're critically important. We believe that a society that empowers parents to raise their children and not the government, that parents actually are the critical decision makers in the lives of their children, whether that is physical, spiritual, education, you name it, it should be the parent, not the local public school, not our government officials, and sometimes our government officials tend to sometimes inadvertently, these days, I'm not going to even argue that it's actually accidental, step in between the role of a parent and a child. And we look at those issues very carefully. That gets us into areas like school choice, for example, something that some of you may be engaged with, and understanding that a parent needs that. They have the fundamental obligation to educate their child and need to be able to make that best decision for their child. The fourth principle that is sort of within our scope that we get involved in is that we believe that a society that cherishes religious freedom is also going to cherish individual freedom. And those things are critically linked, and we need to preserve both of those, that we need to understand that part of one's conscience needs to be able to be a part of the public square. That's something our founders were completely in tune with and set up our country to do, to allow people of faith to express their faith in the public square, and we've gone a long way from that over the years. And in particular now, we have a culture that is much more hostile to people of faith. And then the fifth principle is we know that a society that embraces restraint on government is also going to embrace liberty. That you can't have a government that's out of control and have that concept of liberty prevail. And so basically we have these 5 areas that we work on. And if you're familiar with the General Assembly, they see approximately 2,000 or more bills in a 45 or 60-day period. It is a slew of things that are thrown at our legislators. And what we do is we go through that 2,000 plus bills and we say, what do these bills fall into these categories? You know, which of these bills affect the family in the following ways? Our mission is to strengthen the family by applying our faith and our founding principles, these constitutional concepts, to culture and public policy. And so we look at these 2,000 bills and we say, how is it that these affect our family in the following ways? And we work to then educate our legislators and advocate on behalf of the family in these areas. What we do sort of falls into three buckets. The first one is education, and this is something that you guys get, and that, like I mentioned, our founder really emphasized heavily. People don't have the information, and therefore they can't make good decisions, whether that's at the ballot box, whether that's in the legislature. So we educate. The next thing we do is advocacy. We advocate on behalf of these principles at the General Assembly. And this is what I hope you guys have been really encouraged to do, is build that relationship. When we were just talking about go talk to Chris Peace, that is because it is critical that they are hearing from the people that they represent. We represent hundreds of thousands of Virginians across our Commonwealth that share these same values, but we recognize they're raising their families, they're running their businesses. They can't be at the Capitol every day to make sure that our elected officials are actually representing the values that we believe in, are actually working on restraint in government. And so we advocate on behalf of those. When I walk into Doug Peace's office or Senator McDougal's, they don't care what we have to say. They care that I represent all of these folks that would be down there if they could. And so it's really important that there's a group down there. I don't know if you all have been down there, but there's a lobbyist for every cause you could possibly imagine. And you mentioned the Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion is not hard to figure out. Go down there and see how many lobbyists there are from the hospitals, from the insurance companies, from everybody who stands to financially gain from Medicaid expansion. And it is not just Democrats that are in the pockets of these lobbyists. These lobbyists have tremendous influence. They might be next to the teachers union. They're probably the next largest block of lobbyists. And so some of these issues, it's critical that we have representatives that are actually down there supporting liberty, supporting restraint on government, that there are actually people countering all of those paid forces that our legislators hear from every single day. So we advocate on behalf of these issues. And the third thing we do is that we actually focus on accountability. Once we elect these guys, we send them down there. Do they represent what we thought we were electing? We get the campaign promises. We all know what those look like. In the middle of the election cycle, we have the literature, and we have the robocalls, and we have the commercials. But what do they actually stand for? And then when they go there, do they follow through with their campaign promises? I think we all know a lot of elected officials, particularly recently, that we thought were not pro-tax, that have actually supported a tremendous tax hike across Virginia. And so there's a number of different things we do on the accountability side. One of them many of you are holding, which is our report card. Our goal is to present transparency for voters, to show voters what the votes are that these folks take. So on those 5 categories of constitutional government, religious liberty, parental authority, life, and marriage, we actually look at what we consider 20 key indicators, 20 votes over the cross-section of those issues, and we score them. We actually lay out those votes in front of the voters in the scorecard, and we say, where do they stand? Are they really conservative? As your point, anybody can call themselves a conservative, but are they actually conservative? And we give them a score. And this is one of the sort of most well-known documents that we do, because voters want to know, they just don't know how to get the information. So we make it as simple as possible. And this is a tool that we find is used in these kind of groups, so folks can get it. And churches also love this tool, where they can say, you know what, this isn't necessarily politics, because we're not comparing candidates. We're just looking at how are the people who represent our area actually doing once they get there. And so that's a tool that we have a lot of churches that take. We do a lot of other things on accountability. That's probably the most known, but we really believe in transparency. We also push for a lot of transparency bills. Having 72 hours before the budget goes from inception to vote. I don't know if you realize how fast our legislators are expected to look at a budget and then vote on it, let alone if any of us actually want to see it in the process before they vote to weigh in. So we do a lot in terms of legislation that would make the General Assembly more transparent to the public, and we've been really pushing for those bills. Even the good guys tend to resist that. I will tell you, even some of our best legislators will say, well, we're working on it, and we sort of have an agreement, we're going to kind of do this, but they won't actually pass legislation that says we are going to be held accountable to reveal things like the budget. And so you'll see us get very involved with that. The other part of accountability that we do is we get engaged in the election cycle very specifically. We have field staff that go out and work with churches and civic groups. We do some robocalling and some door knocking to really make sure voters know where these guys stand. Most of the folks running for statewide office this year have a record. That's not true for a few of them, but we have, Mark Herring, we have Northam, we've got Senate records there. Cuccinelli had a record, and we can, it's not on this one because he's been in the Attorney General's office, but you can see where he voted on all of our old scorecards. And so, with the exception of maybe EW, we have not just what they are saying, but what they have done, which we would argue is much more important than what they are telling us they will do. And so we work in the election to make sure that information makes it out to voters. There's a lot of these things. You can get our report cards through our website. We have a C4, it's under Family Foundation Action, but you can get those kind of transparency items in our website and so forth. We also, as an accountability mechanism, is we do email alerts. And that is critical. During the General Assembly session, as I said, they meet for 45 or 60 days. Not a lot of time. It's not like Congress where a bill sits for a little while and you have a couple weeks to weigh in. A bill moves very quickly through our General Assembly. And so it's critical that folks are signed up and getting information that comes very quickly as issues arise so that you know this is going to committee tomorrow. My legislator is going to vote on this as soon as tomorrow. I need to get an email off, or I need to make a phone call to this legislator to ask them, to vote a specific way. And so we really encourage folks to sign up to get this information. I know Roger has some cards back there, but you really want to have information coming in a timely fashion during the General Assembly. And what I want to share with you is sort of how we can build together and sort of how I see, some of these issues are things that you all are engaged in, taxes and limited government. Some of the things aren't necessarily issues that this group is involved in, but I just wanted to share a little bit about how the issues connect, because I think it's really important that we understand these issues are connected. The first thing is that we can have the best designed economy in the world, but if it isn't built on values, it will fall apart. Adams even recognized this. I don't know if you remember reading, he made the comment, our government is built for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate for anything else. He got it. He got that there's a great system, but it has to be upheld by people of values. And also, if you look at it, we can have sort of the best system of government in the world, and we do, but if it isn't built on values, it will fail. Also, if you think about our military, you could have the best military in the world, but if it doesn't value human life, you have a very significant problem. We really look at all of the issues as very interconnected. For us, we take a very strong pro-life stance, and we view this as also a critical factor related to our economy. The loss of 50 million people to abortion over the last couple of decades has cost our economy $35 trillion. There's a real economic impact. One of the reasons is Social Security is going broke is because we don't have enough people, right, to cover the payments that we're making the generation in front of us. Those are 50 million people that aren't here to be a part of the economic engine that was created to pay for Social Security. The estimate is that at least 3 out of those 5 people, of those 50 million, would be in the workforce today, would be workforce improvements to what we have today. And so we see these issues as critically connected. Marriage, this is an issue that might seem like, well, there's social issues over here and there's economic issues over here. But there was a study that was done related to out-of-wedlock births and family fragmentation. And basically, they went state by state and looked at the cost of family fragmentation. And the costs play out in the juvenile justice system, in the welfare system. Single women have a harder time staying off of our welfare rolls. And the cost that was given to Virginia is that it was $776 million per year in social services that related to family fragmentation. So we want less government, but we can't just say we need less government. We actually have to get to what are the causes that are requiring so much of our tax dollars.
Fix the problem.
Yes, we have to fix the problem, not just Band-Aid the piece that's the obvious sort of glaring part. The other piece is when we get into the issue of parental rights, and I mentioned school choice being absolutely critical to us, a better educated society is what's going to affect our workforce. I mean, fundamentally, our economy sits on, and politicians are good at making this connection. They're just really not so good about understanding how you get to the best education system, which is by competition, which I think we all understand fundamentally here. But if you do not have the education system you need, you're not going to have the economy. And unfortunately, we're seeing the ramifications in our economy of what our school system has been doing over time, and the fact that legislators have been so slow to catch up to the idea of competition. The Family Foundation is working on school choice for, gosh, I guess it's about 15 years now. And we finally got a small school choice program 2 years ago that is still not yet, it's still working on getting started because there was some delayed implementation. So we are way behind the curve in trying to figure out what we do in every other area. Hospitals. You're not assigned to a hospital. You got to go to this hospital. It's in your backyard, whether they care for you or not. No. But we do it in education. It's a very bizarre thing that our teachers union, an illusion that our teachers union has been able to create that is just un-American, honestly. And the fourth piece that I just want to mention is completely connected to the economics. Religious liberty. For us, that's a huge deal, related to, somebody being able to share their beliefs and be able to be a part. But if we just historically look at the role that churches have played in the social service sector, it has been tremendous. And just yesterday Obama gave this speech about Catholic schools, and I don't know if anybody caught this. It was sort of, well, if we have Catholics in one set of schools and we have Protestants in another, we're just going to be this divided country. And really, it was kind of a shocking speech. Not that we don't know that he believes this, but it was a little shocking that he actually said it, and said it in front of a bunch of Catholic school kids, which just is typical tone-deaf Obama. But it's amazing, because what he continues to what he continues to miss is an understanding of what these religious communities have done in history for caring for the poor, for all of the things that we need in our communities. And what happens is we at the Family Foundation find ourselves having to defend the ability for religious communities to continue to provide critical services to our communities. And a great example of this is just 2 years ago, we found that there were, actually it started at the end of Governor Kane's administration. They tried to sneak through a change in regulations that said, well, we know there have been all these faith-based organizations that do adoption. We know there's Catholic Charities and there's Lutheran Services, and we know that, but we're going to only allow them to continue to do the great work that they're doing, that they've done for decades, if they share our convictions that everyone should be allowed to adopt, my two moms, so forth. Catholics are not going to go for that. I think we understand that. There's a lot of Protestants that's clearly against their beliefs biblically. And so we tried to sneak in, this liberal administration tries to sneak in these regulations and say, guess what, we're going to set this new rule. Well, that rule would have shut down many of those agencies, because the Catholics in other states have chosen to close shop rather than violate their conscience, their faith. And so we stepped in and actually changed that regulation, and then we went forward and said, you know what, we're not going to play this regulatory game. We're going to put this in the Code of Virginia. We are not going to discriminate on faith-based providers. But we need to understand that there are faith-based providers in every area of life here, in feeding the homeless, whether it's the adoption, pregnancy resource centers. They do some amazing work, but they also happen to share the gospel. And so what we recognize is, if we start saying, you may not participate with the government in serving our community because you have faith, guess what? Guess who picks up the bill? If all these places shut down, it's our tax dollars that will do more services, because there will be less given by our faith-based communities. And so all of these issues, I know your focus is government, size of government, scope of government, and as is ours, but we see each of our other issues very closely connected to the tax issue and to the spending and to the understanding of human liberty. And so I just wanted to share that with you, because I think there's some really neat ways that we can work together on some of these bills, whether it's transportation or Medicaid expansion, or there's a slew of things that are that we encounter at the General Assembly. And I want to encourage you to really consider being engaged with the General Assembly, knowing your legislator, starting to build that relationship. If you don't have a relationship with your legislators, you should. Because the more you have a relationship, then when you go during session to say, hey, what are you about to do? Let me make sure you don't vote this way. They take under advisement much better people that they've actually met, that they realize, oh, you don't wear two horns. You know, people think you're crazy if your family foundation, oh, Victoria, you know. But if they know you and they know, hey, we've got a real relationship, we built it out of session, you know, we got to know each other, and then when we come in and swoop in and say, you need to be really careful here, don't take this bad vote, it means that much more. So I really encourage you. And also, you guys, I mentioned this at the beginning, being closer to the Capitol is really a gift. It's really a stewardship thing. You guys have a better ability to go down there when there are rallies, when there are opportunities to weigh in, than a lot of folks around the state. And so I really encourage you, to the extent that you're able, when there are opportunities to participate, you know, whether it's, you know, we do pro-life rallies on the first day of the session. Americans for Prosperity does a, you know, usually an economic rally midway through. You know, when there are those opportunities, I really encourage you to say, you know what, I can do this. I can take this day off of work, or, you know, I can find a ride down there, because I know it's intimidating. I recognize it's not the easiest thing to go downtown, find a place to park, you know, find your legislator. But I really think you guys have a really special and unique opportunity. I'm just going to kind of in close talk a little bit about just, we do have an election this year, and the Family Foundation is extremely engaged in this election. I don't know specifically what your Tea Party intends to do, but I want to just share with you opportunities that you have to get involved with us. A couple things that we do. I mentioned to you the report cards, and the churches take report cards. If there are folks here who have a faith community or have another civic event, you know, other than the Tea Party that you attend, where you think report cards could be helpful, we have those. We would love to give those to you. We would love for you to encourage your church to be willing to get that information out to their community. It's a critical opportunity. We look at churches as they're already meeting, they're already organized, and they generally share our values. I mean, generally. So it's a good place to start. And so I really encourage you. We also have commitment cards. Roger can share those with you, but they're just cards that encourage voters to really commit to voting on the specific important issues, as opposed to walking up knowing nothing. And it kind of reminds them to vote. So it's a commitment card. If you think folks in a community that you have in mind, your church or your local civic group would like those, we have those as well. We will be starting in this area the sort of door knock phone bank operations are not up and running yet, but we are in the process of hiring our person for here, maybe multiple people, but hiring at least one person for here this week, figuring out where we're going to do that. I don't know if you guys have a separate operation, so I don't want to take from what you guys are doing, but if you're interested and you think you have time, I love the sort of the phone bank operations and door knocks that go through these outside organizations, because I believe we can message in a way that the direct party is not going to always. I just think it's a different message, and I think voters kind of want to hear about the issues, not just, you know, the party line. And so I really encourage you, if that's something that you think you could do, we would love to have you. Roger, do you have cards to pass out, or?
I can pass them out now.
Either way, but I just want to make sure people get the cards so they can sign up and be a part of.
Would you hold that, Roger, just till the end?
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's a pleasure and an honor to have Victoria take time from her very hectic schedule to come out here and share with us the good work that the Family Foundation is doing. So let's give her a nice